The truth hurts. You're not healing. You're just hiding. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. At Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the hard truths that can set you free, even when they sting. Today, we'll uncover why what you call healing might actually be a carefully crafted disguise, a way of hiding from the parts of yourself that need the most light. True growth is not about perfecting a mask, but about daring to face the shadows you've been avoiding. So as you listen, ask yourself, are you truly healing or just hiding? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. 1. Hiding behind a mask. Too often, silence is mistaken for serenity, smiles for joy, busyness for purpose, and achievement for fulfillment. We convince ourselves that if our outer life appears fine, then we must be fine. Friends see the smile, colleagues see the success, and even family believes we have it all together. Yet beneath the surface, the soul may carry a quiet, unshakable ache, a restlessness that no amount of pretending can soothe. Carl Jung called this hidden realm the shadow, the buried, unacknowledged parts of ourselves that continue to shape our lives until we bring them into the light. The shadow is not merely a collection of flaws or failures, but the unhealed wounds we've tried to forget, the truths we've been too afraid to speak, and the emotions we've learned to silence in order to be accepted. We live in a world that rewards performance over authenticity. From childhood, we learn that being agreeable feels safer than being honest, that staying busy keeps uncomfortable truths at bay, and that achieving more will somehow quiet the unrest inside. But unresolved pain cannot be buried forever. It seeps through the cracks in the dreams that wake us in the night, in the triggers that catch us off guard, in the self-sabotage that robs us of the very things we say we want. Jung warned that ignoring this shadow doesn't erase it. It simply allows it to operate in the background, influencing our choices without our conscious consent. This is why people find themselves drawn to the same unhealthy relationships, repeating the same destructive patterns, or feeling inexplicably empty no matter what they accomplish. When hiding is mistaken for healing, the soul is denied its true work transformation. The soul was never meant to live behind a mask. It was meant to be whole. Wholeness requires courage, the courage to acknowledge pain, anger, shame, and grief without turning away. This is not about drowning in suffering. It is about allowing what has been hidden to be seen, understood, and integrated, so it no longer holds power over us. True healing is the process of making peace with every part of ourselves, even the parts we once rejected. When we stop running from the shadow, we reclaim our inner power. The patterns that once bound us begin to lose their grip, and the choices we make start to reflect truth instead of fear. The soul shifts from survival into genuine peace, and life begins to flow from a place of authenticity rather than performance. This is the freedom that comes when we choose to meet ourselves fully. And in that meeting, the shadow no longer hides in the dark. It becomes a part of the light we carry forward. If you're ready to face your shadow and stop hiding behind the mask, comment below, "I choose truth over disguise," and let your healing begin. 2. Performance versus authenticity. Carl Jung once said, The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Yet for many, that privilege is buried under layers of roles we never chose. From childhood, survival often meant stepping into an identity that would keep us safe, loved, or accepted, becoming the peacekeeper who smoothed over every conflict, the achiever who chased perfection to prove worth, or the invisible one who stayed quiet to avoid harm. These roles began as shields, ways to navigate an environment where love was conditional and approval had to be earned. But over time, they hardened into masks so familiar we mistook them for our true selves, even as our soul quietly ached beneath the weight of pretending. These identities, while once protective, become prisons when we carry them into adulthood. I knew a woman who spent decades climbing the career ladder, collecting awards, and earning the admiration of peers, only to find every success hollow. She wasn't chasing her dreams. She was chasing safety, silencing the deep-rooted fear that without constant achievement, she would be abandoned. This is the trap of performance over authenticity. You can be celebrated by the world, yet feel invisible to yourself. And in today's hyper-connected world, social media magnifies the pressure, pushing us to present a perfect image, to curate a life that wins approval while hiding the truth of who we are. As Carl Jung warned, when we live through personas built for survival, the soul suffers, because no external validation can heal the longing to be seen as we truly are. Breaking free from these roles demands courage. It asks you to question the very identity you've spent your life maintaining. If you stop trying to please, impress, or disappear, who would you be? It may mean setting boundaries that disrupt your peacekeeper role, choosing rest and joy over relentless achievement, or speaking your truth even when it risks rejection. This is the moment where real healing begins, not when you perfect the performance, but when you lay it down. Beneath the mask, your real self is still there. The self that existed before fear taught you to shapeshift for acceptance, the self that doesn't need to be earned or proven because it simply is. Living from that place transforms life from a constant audition into an honest dialogue between your soul and the world. Recognizing the role you've been playing, understanding why it formed, daring to live beyond it, and reclaiming your true essence is the work your soul has been waiting for you to begin. For while authenticity may cost you the approval of some, it will return to you the one thing performance can never give: freedom. Have you ever questioned if the life you're living is truly yours, or just a role you learned to survive? Share your experience in the comments so others can reflect too. If not, type, "I choose my true self," and let's step into authenticity together. 3. The soul's rebellion. Procrastination, self-sabotage, and the repetition of toxic patterns are not always signs of weakness. They can be your soul's rebellion against a life that does not belong to you. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When your authentic self is trapped beneath layers of performance, people-pleasing, and survival masks, it will resist in ways you may mistake for failure. You delay tasks, avoid commitments, or find yourself pulled back into the same harmful cycles, not out of laziness, but because a deeper part of you refuses to invest energy into what feels false. Achievements, no matter how impressive, feel hollow when they require the betrayal of your true self. You could stand in the spotlight, celebrated by thousands, and still feel the quiet ache of living a life that does not align with your truth. When the mask is still on, the heart cannot breathe. The mind creates pauses over thinking, distraction, avoidance, not because you are incapable, but because your inner being is guarding you from walking further into a reality that erases you. In a world obsessed with productivity and appearances, we are taught to fight these signs instead of listening to them. We adopt time hacks, rigid schedules, and guilt-driven motivation, yet none of these touch the real wound. You cannot heal while you are still pretending. You cannot fix what is not broken, only misaligned. Every time you silence that small voice inside that says, "I don't want this," you drift further from your spiritual compass. And when ignored, your soul refuses to stay quiet, and it will rebel. This rebellion may appear as procrastination or sabotage, but in truth, it is self-preservation. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, and it cannot happen if your daily life forces you into a role that is not yours. Your delays and detours may not be proof of failure, but proof that you are being redirected toward what is real. Perhaps the resistance you feel is not an enemy, but a message. Perhaps every pause is your soul's way of saving you from a path that would cost you yourself. Healing is not about forcing action through willpower. It is about removing the mask so your energy can flow toward what aligns with your essence. As Rumi wrote, try to accept the changing seasons of your soul, even the winters, for without them, spring would not be possible. When you honor that truth, resistance fades, toxic cycles lose their grip, and you move forward not because you pushed harder, but because you finally chose a path your soul is willing to walk. If this message speaks to your soul, don't wait, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments so we can walk this path of truth together. 4. Shadow as forgotten self. The shadow is not an enemy to be feared or destroyed, but the forgotten self, the part of your soul that carries the emotions, desires, and truths you once felt unsafe to express. It is where the unspoken anger lives, where grief hides behind your forced smile, where jealousy quietly brews, and where the unmet needs of your younger self remain unanswered. Over the years, you learned to bury these feelings, believing that if they were hidden, they would lose their power. But the soul does not forget. What is suppressed does not disappear. It seeps into your life in disguised and unrecognizable forms. Resentment that silently poisons your relationships. Fear of abandonment that drives you to either cling desperately or keep others at arm's length. Silent rage that lingers beneath a polite tone, and self-sabotage that blocks the very happiness you long for. These patterns are not random. They are the voice of the shadow, guiding your behavior from the dark. Just as Jung warned that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. It shows itself in the sudden wave of irritation at an innocent remark, in the tightness in your chest when someone touches a nerve you didn't know was there, in the dreams where symbols and strangers whisper truths you cannot quite grasp. It is the part of you that feels left out even when surrounded by love, the part that panics when something good finally comes your way, because deep down it has learned not to trust joy. This hidden self is like a child locked in a room, knocking softly at first, and then louder over time, hoping you will open the door. Each time you ignore the knock, the divide between your conscious self and your true soul widens, and the child grows restless. Your soul is not asking you to be flawless. It is asking you to be whole. And wholeness requires meeting this shadow with presence instead of avoidance, with compassion instead of judgment. When you dare to look at it, you realize that anger, once acknowledged, transforms into a clear understanding of where your boundaries lie. Grief, when honored, becomes a bridge to deeper empathy and connection. Even jealousy, when explored without shame, can illuminate the unlived desires of your life, revealing what your soul is quietly yearning for. This is not the work of quick fixes or superficial affirmations. It is the deep spiritual labor of reclaiming yourself. It means sitting with discomfort long enough for it to speak, listening to the truths you once silenced, and integrating them into your present self so they no longer control you from the shadows. The energy you once spent on suppression becomes available for creation, love, and growth. In embracing the shadow, you are not descending into darkness. You are retrieving the parts of your soul that have been waiting, sometimes for decades, to come home. 5. Facing the shadow. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you spend years building an identity that keeps you safe, stepping outside of it feels like stepping into enemy territory. Many mistake this safety for healing, convincing themselves they've moved on, when, in truth, they've only learned how to hide their wounds more skillfully. The mask you wear might win the approval of others, but beneath it lie the abandoned pieces of yourself, your shadow that hold the very key to your wholeness. True freedom comes not from pretending the shadow isn't there, but from turning toward it, listening to it, and integrating it into who you are. That means opening doors you've kept locked, feeling grief you thought you'd buried, and facing the fear that the parts you've hidden might push people away. In everyday life, this shows up more often than we admit. Someone goes through a painful breakup, and to the world, they seem fine posting smiling photos, filling their calendar with trips, telling everyone they're better off. Yet privately, they avoid certain songs, places, and conversations because they stir feelings they'd rather suppress. Months later, an unshakable emptiness lingers, untouched by all the distractions. That is the shadow, subtle, persistent, and unwilling to be ignored. Sometimes it looks like keeping yourself endlessly busy, so you never have to be alone with your thoughts, or surrounding yourself with people who never challenge your patterns. Carl Jung warned that the shadow you ignore doesn't disappear. It grows stronger, quietly steering your choices, shaping your relationships, and eroding your sense of worth from behind the scenes. The reason facing it feels so dangerous is because your old identity, the cage, is familiar. It might limit you, but it feels predictable. The moment you start dismantling that cage, your mind and body interpret it as a threat, and the discomfort can be overwhelming. Pain, grief, and disorientation are not signs of failure. They are proof that you're dismantling the survival patterns that no longer serve you. This is the in-between space shedding the skin of who you were without yet knowing who you will become. It's raw, uncertain, and deeply transformative, the place where your soul begins to gather back the fragments it lost along the way. In a culture obsessed with positivity, it's tempting to run from this darkness, but doing so leaves you split in two. If you only embrace your light while rejecting your shadow, you'll forever live a half-life. Real growth asks you to carry both the parts you love and the parts you wish you could erase, and to see them not as enemies, but as allies. The shadow is not here to destroy you. It is here to complete you. Every piece you reclaim adds to your strength, your authenticity, and your freedom. The discomfort is not a reason to stop. It is a sign you are exactly where you need to be, walking the only path that leads to real healing. If you're ready to step out of the familiar cage and face your shadow, repeat after me. I embrace my shadow and reclaim my true self. I am free. 6. Self-abandonment. What most people don't realize is that once you become aware of your destructive patterns, continuing them is no longer simply the result of trauma. It becomes an act of self-abandonment. This means you are no longer a victim of the past, but an active participant in your own limitation. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And this is where many people get stuck. They finally see the truth about their patterns, their relationships, and the masks they have worn to survive. But they choose to stay the same because change feels like death. The truth is, it is a kind of death. The death of the false self you have been loyal to for years. It's the part of you that was built to please, to avoid conflict, to survive in a family, a culture, or a relationship that couldn't hold your authentic self. But the danger is this: staying loyal to that false self means you are slowly killing your own potential, suffocating the life your soul was meant to live, and betraying the very spiritual journey you are here to fulfill. Letting go of these old identities requires immense courage, because it means walking away from the safety of what you've always known, even if it was painful. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking into the unknown, knowing you must jump without any guarantee of where you'll land. That leap is terrifying, because grief will meet you on the way down. You will grieve the loss of who you thought you were, the roles you played, and even the relationships that only survived because you kept playing small. This grief is not a sign that you're failing. It is the proof that you're shedding an old skin. In spiritual terms, you are going through a death and rebirth cycle, a sacred rite of passage that transforms you from someone who is unconsciously reacting to life into someone who is consciously creating it. The problem is, many people confuse comfort with healing. They avoid the deep, messy work of transformation by surrounding themselves with distractions, convincing themselves that keeping the peace is the same as being healed. But peace without truth is just a beautifully decorated cage. If you've been hiding behind positive thinking, constant busyness, or avoiding difficult conversations, you're not healing, you're hiding. And the cost of that hiding is enormous. The slow erosion of your inner power, the dulling of your intuition, and the quiet suffocation of your dreams. Spiritual growth demands that you stop abandoning yourself. It asks you to choose the discomfort of truth over the comfort of illusion, to face the pain of change rather than the numbness of staying the same. You have to understand that your soul did not come here to be safe. It came here to be free. And freedom is not found in clinging to old wounds or familiar masks. It's found in breaking the cycle, even if it costs you relationships, approval, or the identity you've worn for decades. As the poet Rumi said, Try to accept the changing seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the passing seasons of the year. The grief you feel when you let go is the winter before the spring. It's the necessary clearing before the new growth can emerge. So if you are standing in front of the choice right now to stay the same or to let go, choose yourself. Choose to stop abandoning your own heart. Choose the path that feels uncertain but alive, because that is the only path where your soul can finally breathe, expand, and fulfill its true purpose. And in the end, you will realize that the pain you feared was never your enemy. It was your initiation into becoming who you were always meant to be. 7. Real healing is messy. Real healing is never glamorous or instant. It is raw, unpolished, and often feels like standing in the wreckage of who you once were, sorting through the pieces to see what still belongs to you and what must be released. It is the slow, sometimes agonizing process of dismantling the false self you built to survive. The one that learned to smile while silently suffering, to stay agreeable while quietly breaking inside. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain, and this pain is the soul's invitation to step into truth." It is messy work grieving the versions of yourself that wore masks, letting go of coping patterns that once kept you safe but now keep you stuck, and learning to breathe in the unfamiliar air of authenticity. In these moments, the soul does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be honest, and that honesty can look like sleepless nights, unanswered questions, and waves of emotions you can no longer suppress. The heart of transformation often reveals itself in the smallest of spaces, the pause between the trigger and your reaction. This pause is not just an empty gap. It is the seed of freedom, the moment where the unconscious programming of your false self meets the conscious choice of your awakened self. In that breath, you can either repeat the same old cycle or create something entirely new. Most people overlook this moment, waiting for some dramatic shift. But the soul often works in whispers before it speaks in thunder. Choosing differently in that pause is where real healing begins. Because it is not about never being triggered again. It is about not letting those triggers control the direction of your life. This journey will also take you through grief, not only the grief of losing people, but the grief of losing identities you thought were you. You will mourn the parts of yourself that once helped you belong, but never let you be free. Shedding the false self can feel like betrayal to the life you once lived, but it is not betrayal. It is a sacred act of alignment. The soul will not settle for a life built on performance and pretense. It will demand the truth, even if that truth dismantles everything you thought was stable. Your old armor, once necessary in battle, is now too heavy to carry into the future you are meant to create. Taking it off will feel exposed, but in that exposure, you will find liberation. Healing will test your patience. There will be days when you feel like you have gone backwards, moments when you question if you are making any progress at all. But it is often in those unraveling days that the deepest transformation is taking place. These moments strip away illusions, confront your fears, and reveal the unshakable core of your soul. They teach you that healing is not about perfection, but about persistence, not about being untouched by pain, but about choosing love instead of fear, truth instead of denial, presence instead of escape. And in embracing this raw, imperfect, sacred work, you are not just changing how you live. You are reclaiming who you truly are at the deepest level of your being. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to sit in the stillness between trigger and reaction. In this sacred space, healing begins. Repeat with me. I choose freedom over the false self, and I welcome my true transformation. 8. Remembering the real self. Beneath the conditioning, the roles you've been forced to play, and the shame you've carried, there exists the original self-creative, unafraid, unapologetic version of you that once lived freely before you learned to hide in order to survive. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Yet most people bury that truth under masks built to please others. In childhood, you might have learned that speaking up brought criticism, or that standing out invited rejection, so you made yourself smaller to stay safe. That choice may have protected you then, but over time, it cost you something far greater: the ability to recognize and live as your real self. You began wearing the face the world preferred, and while that role earned approval, inside, you felt disconnected from the soul that once burned bright within you. There was someone who lived like this for decades, always agreeable, always accommodating, the one who never made waves. She was respected at work, loved in her family, and admired by friends, yet every night she felt an emptiness she couldn't explain. Her art supplies sat untouched in a dusty corner. Her dreams whispered faintly, but were drowned out by the noise of meeting everyone else's needs. One day, she finally decided to honor herself and create again, even though it meant losing the approval of people who only loved her for the role she played. The world around her shifted. Some relationships faded, others deepened. But for the first time in years, she could look in the mirror without feeling like a stranger. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that to reclaim the authentic self, we must go through individuation, a process that requires us to face the shadow of the parts of us we've denied or been told to suppress. This is not comfortable work. Peeling away the layers of false identity feels vulnerable, even dangerous at first. You may fear judgment, loneliness, or the loss of belonging. But as you step into your truth, you begin to realize that the temporary sting of being misunderstood is nothing compared to the long, dull ache of living a lie. Approval may be withdrawn, but in its place grows something far more valuable: self-respect. Relationships built on illusion may fall away, but the ones that remain will be rooted in truth. The pain of authenticity is sharp but clean. It cuts away what no longer serves you. The pain of hiding is slow and corrosive, wearing you down year after year. Choosing to become who you truly are may disappoint others, but it will set you free from the prison of pretending. The emptiness you feel is not a sign that something is missing from your life. It's a sign that something is missing from yourself. When you stop betraying your own soul to fit the expectations of others, you open the door to a life that is real, whole, and deeply alive. 9. Freedom through truth. You are not broken. You are buried beneath layers of silence, survival habits, and the stories you've been told about who you should be. Freedom is not about fixing yourself to meet the world's approval, but about becoming real, stripping away the masks and letting the truth of who you are breathe again. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. True spiritual awakening begins the moment you stop running from your pain and turn toward it, even when fear tells you it's safer to stay hidden. Fear will whisper that you will lose love, safety, or belonging if you show your true self. But the truth will remind you that what is real can never be taken from you. You may have spent years building an identity that pleases others, avoids conflict, and keeps the peace. But that peace is false if it costs you your own soul. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is sacred. It is saying, I matter too, and honoring the life force within you. This is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you were before the world convinced you to hide. Your soul is like a flame that's been covered for years when you uncover it. The light may sting your eyes at first, but its warmth will remind you that you were never lost, only waiting. Awakening is not gentle. It arrives in moments that shake you. Heartbreak, betrayal, loss, failure. These are not punishments. They are invitations to return to yourself. Life will hold up mirrors through people and situations, showing you the parts of yourself you've abandoned. Healing begins when you stop pretending and speak the truth, even if your voice trembles. The truth will set you free, but first, it will make you miserable. It is uncomfortable to face what you've denied, but those buried parts hold the key to your freedom. To walk the spiritual path of true liberation, you must choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, and self-respect over fitting in. Choosing yourself will feel like betrayal to those who benefited from your silence. But it is the deepest act of loyalty to your soul. You are not here to live a half-life or shrink to fit into someone else's vision of you. You are here to awaken so fully that no fear, no expectation, and no voice from the past can convince you to hide again. To affirm your commitment to living in truth, declare it now. Comment below, I choose to be real. And let your courage inspire others to face what they've been avoiding and step into their own freedom. And remember, true healing begins the moment you stop hiding from yourself. The shadow you avoid today will quietly shape your tomorrow until you choose to face it with courage. If this message has spoken to you, let it be a turning point. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming insights on the path to self-discovery and transformation. They hurt you and act like nothing happened. As Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what happens when someone deeply wounds you, then walks away as if nothing ever happened? In today's video on Spiritual Wisdom, we're going to uncover the hidden psychology behind why people can hurt you and still sleep peacefully at night, and how you can transform that pain into personal power. As you listen, think about the moments in your life when you felt this silent betrayal, and ask yourself, what did it teach you about your own strength? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so share your experiences and let's grow together. 1. They remember everything but refuse accountability. They remember every detail, every word, every glance that betrayed their true intent, yet they will never admit it. This is not forgetfulness. It is a deliberate choice, a wall built to protect the fragile architecture of their ego. Acknowledging what they did would mean dismantling the image they have carefully constructed of themselves as good, righteous, or justified. For people whose identity depends on that illusion, confession is not just uncomfortable, it is soul-threatening. Their ego fears that if they face the truth, the entire edifice will crumble, and they will be left standing in the rubble of their own shadow. So they choose denial, not because they lack memory, but because the truth burns too brightly for them to look at directly. Denial becomes their shield, allowing them to rewrite history in their mind, turning themselves into the misunderstood, the justified, or even the victim, while quietly erasing your pain from the narrative. In their inner courtroom, they are both the accused and the judge, and to rule against themselves would be to hand down a sentence they could not survive. So they manipulate the evidence, twist the facts, and alter the sequence of events until their conscience is lulled back into silence. They can sleep soundly, not because they are innocent, but because they have locked the truth away in a place where it can no longer disturb them. And yet, deep within, the memory remains. They carry it in the quiet chambers of their mind, an unspoken record that they will never show you. This is why you lie awake at night, replaying the moments. While they go on with their lives as though nothing happened, they have not forgotten. They have simply buried the truth so far down that it no longer touches the surface. Understanding this is a turning point for the soul, because it releases you from the exhausting quest for acknowledgement that may never come. Waiting for their apology is like standing at a train station for a train that was never scheduled to arrive. It drains your hope and binds your healing to their willingness to face themselves. But they have chosen self-preservation over self-awareness, illusion over truth. And the more you understand that, the more you realize that their silence says nothing about your worth and everything about their fear. They are not ready to confront the darkness within, and perhaps they never will be. The shadow, as Carl Jung taught, is the part of the psyche that contains all that we refuse to see in ourselves, and it takes courage to bring it into the light. Not everyone will make that journey, and forcing them will only pull you deeper into their denial. Your task is not to drag them into the light, but to keep your own light alive. The flame of your soul cannot be entrusted to someone who fears their own reflection. You are not here to wait for their conscience to awaken, nor to sacrifice your peace at the altar of their silence. You are here to protect the essence of who you are, to choose freedom over the invisible chains of their denial, and to understand that healing is not found in their confession, but in your decision to stop carrying the weight of their refusal to see the truth. They will remember for the rest of their lives what they did. You just have to decide that you will no longer let their choice to deny it define yours. Comment below, I choose truth over denial. If you're ready to stand in your power and never let someone's refusal to take accountability define your worth. 2. Shadow projection as self-protection. Carl Jung taught us that the shadow is the part of ourselves we try to hide the flaws, fears, and uncomfortable truths we cannot bear to face. When a person refuses to deal with their own darkness, they will often unconsciously project it onto someone else, making that person carry the guilt, shame, and pain they will not acknowledge. In this way, they shift the emotional weight off themselves, twisting the story until you become the one who is wrong, broken, or untrustworthy. This process, which Jung called shadow projection, allows them to feel safer in their own mind, but it leaves you burdened with emotions that were never yours to carry. You may see it when a coworker makes a costly mistake, yet subtly blames you in front of others. When a friend spreads hurtful rumors to hide their own poor choices, or when a partner accuses you of betrayal while they themselves have been dishonest. In each case, the pattern is the same. They protect themselves from the pain of self-awareness by placing it on you. And because facing the truth would shatter the image they have built, they carry on as if nothing happened. You are left questioning your own reality, feeling unsettled and wronged, while they seem untouched. It is like trying to speak to a mirror that only reflects what it wants you to see. It hides the stains and cracks, presenting a controlled version of reality that keeps them safe and you trapped in confusion. Carl Jung's wisdom urges us to recognize this behavior for what it is, because once you see the projection, you can step out of the role they have assigned you. You begin to understand that their accusations are simply echoes of their own inner battles, and you stop taking responsibility for wounds you did not cause. In modern life, learning to identify and resist shadow projection is a form of emotional self-defense. It allows you to set boundaries, respond with calm instead of anger, and keep your peace without guilt. The value here is in reclaiming your emotional sovereignty, because when you no longer carry the shadows of others, you protect the clarity of your own mind and the integrity of your soul. You cannot stop people from projecting, but you can refuse to let their unhealed wounds define you. 3. Silence as a weapon. When someone chooses silence instead of addressing the pain they caused you, it is rarely accidental. It is often a calculated act, a spiritual tactic of control disguised as indifference. This silence is not the peaceful kind that heals. It is the kind that wounds, erodes, and manipulates. By refusing to respond, they shift the emotional burden entirely onto you, forcing you to replay every word, every moment, every possible misstep in your mind, as though the cause of the rupture must be your fault. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Yet in the hands of someone who wields silence as a weapon, that irritation becomes a carefully laid psychological trap. Their non-response plants seeds of self-doubt in your mind until you begin questioning your own memory, your own feelings, and even your own worth. They know that human beings are wired for closure, for the reassurance of being heard, and when that need is denied, it creates a craving for an emotional dependency that can tether you to them long after the relationship has turned toxic. This tactic is especially dangerous because it allows them to shield themselves from consequences. Without words, there is nothing to refute, no confession to hold against them, no tangible proof of wrongdoing. And in that vacuum, you are left to fill the silence with your own interpretations, often ones that condemn yourself. In spiritual terms, this is the corrosion of your inner light through emotional starvation. Communication is the lifeblood of connection, and when it is deliberately withheld, it is not just your mind that suffers, but your soul. Lao Tzu said, "Silence is a source of great strength, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a silent war, one where the battlefield is your heart, and the wounds are invisible." Over time, the confusion they create turns into self-censorship. You stop expressing your feelings out of fear of more silence, and in doing so, you shrink your emotional presence in the relationship. This shrinking is what they count on. The smaller you feel, the larger their control grows. It is a cycle that can only be broken when you recognize silence for what it truly is. Not a neutral absence of words, but a deliberate signal meant to disempower you. This pattern reveals more about their inability to face truth than it does about your worthiness of love or respect. People who cannot engage in honest dialogue often carry unresolved shadows of the very parts of themselves they cannot bear to confront. By staying silent, they avoid the mirror you hold up to their actions. Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And in this case, their unconscious avoidance drives their behavior. Your task is not to see the silence as a reflection of your inadequacy, but as evidence of their unhealed wounds. That awareness turns silence from a chain into a message, a sign that your spiritual boundaries must be fortified. You reclaim your power by refusing to beg for answers they will never give, by no longer dancing to the rhythm of their withholding. Instead, you speak your truth, even if they refuse to hear it. And in doing so, you shift the balance of power back into your own hands. The silence that once kept you trapped becomes the stillness that sets you free when you use it to listen to your own soul rather than their absence. If this message speaks to your experience, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a lesson. Together, we'll uncover the truth behind silent manipulation and reclaim your emotional power. 4. The innocent persona and ego protection. The innocent persona is not true innocence, but a mask carefully crafted to protect the ego and avoid the discomfort of self-confrontation. People who adopt it operate from a deep fear that admitting their faults will shatter the identity they have clung to for years, sometimes for their entire lives. This fear drives them to hide behind a facade of perpetual goodness, convincing themselves and others that they could never intentionally cause harm. Carl Jung's reminder that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate applies perfectly here, because their refusal to face their shadow ensures they remain trapped in the same patterns, never allowing their soul to evolve. They do not merely want to be seen as innocent. They need to be seen that way, for their sense of self depends on it. You may notice how such people quickly deflect blame, rewrite events, or retreat into self-pity, playing the role of the misunderstood victim. They may give half-hearted apologies filled with vague words that never truly admit wrongdoing. Or they may pretend the hurt never occurred at all, acting as if silence can erase memory. This behavior is not random. It is a defense mechanism honed over years to protect the ego from the death that comes with humility and self-awareness. Often, the roots of this mask lie in early experiences where admitting mistakes brought punishment, humiliation, or rejection. So the psyche learned to survive by avoiding fault at all costs. But this self-protection comes with a heavy price. It walls them off from growth, intimacy, and the deep healing that only truth can bring. Beneath the surface, there is a spiritual stagnation that robs them of genuine connection. The soul cannot expand inside the prison of denial, and so their relationships often feel hollow, filtered through layers of performance rather than authentic vulnerability. You may feel an emptiness in their presence, a lack of depth that comes from never meeting the real person, only their carefully maintained image. Understanding this frees you from the exhausting need to make them see the truth, because acknowledgement is not only about willingness, it is about readiness. A soul still hiding in the comfort of false innocence cannot yet bear the weight of self-awareness. Your role is not to force their awakening, but to honor your own. See the mask for what it is, protect your peace, and set clear boundaries without guilt. Recognize that their inability to face reality is not a reflection of your value, but of their fear. When you stop trying to extract truth from someone committed to avoiding it, you reclaim your own energy. And in doing so, you choose to live in alignment with truth, allowing your soul to keep moving toward transformation and spiritual wholeness, unburdened by the illusions they insist on keeping. Comment below. I choose truth over illusion. If you're ready to let go of false innocence and step into real transformation. 5. Gaslighting and rewriting reality. Gaslighting is one of the most subtle yet destructive forms of manipulation, and Carl Jung's insight into the human shadow reveals why it leaves such deep wounds. When someone deliberately deflects, denies, or twists events, they are not just disagreeing with you. They are reshaping your reality, making you doubt what you saw, felt, and experienced. This is not about truth. It's about control. They reframe the story so they become either the victim who deserves sympathy or the hero who deserves praise. And with enough repetition, their version starts to sound convincing even to you. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And gaslighting operates in that unconscious space, exploiting your natural desire for harmony and understanding. In modern life, this might look like a partner who betrayed your trust but insists you remember it wrong, or a coworker who steals your ideas but makes you feel irrational for pointing it out. Over time, these experiences chip away at your self-trust, leaving you dependent on their distorted narrative to define reality. What's really happening is projection. They cannot face their own guilt, shame, or insecurity, so they push it onto you, making you carry the emotional weight they refuse to confront. In today's hyper-connected world, the damage can be even greater, as social media gives them a stage to rewrite events publicly, gain sympathy, and portray themselves as righteous, while you are left isolated and doubting yourself. This is why protecting your mind is essential. Keep a clear record of what happened. Trust the quiet voice inside that knows the truth, and surround yourself with people who affirm reality rather than distort it. You don't have to fight every battle or prove yourself to someone determined to misunderstand you. Boundaries are not just a defense. They are a declaration that your inner world is sacred territory. Their denial is not proof that you are wrong. It's proof that they cannot face themselves. Carl Jung's wisdom shows us that healing begins when you stop surrendering your truth to another's illusion, when you choose to see with clarity instead of through the lens they hand you, and when you reclaim the authority to define your own story. 6. Emotional immaturity limits accountability. When someone hurts you and acts as if nothing happened, it's often not because they've forgotten or because your pain was insignificant, but because they have reached an emotional ceiling, a limit in their capacity to to take responsibility for their actions. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And in this truth lies a mirror. Their inability to face you honestly is not a reflection of your value, but of their own inner fractures. For those trapped in emotional immaturity, accountability feels like a threat to their very identity. Admitting fault is not just uncomfortable, it is terrifying, because in their minds, to confess wrongdoing is to dismantle the fragile self-image they've been protecting for years. They fear that acknowledging the harm they've caused will shatter the mask they wear, forcing them to confront wounds they've spent a lifetime avoiding. This is why genuine apologies from them are so rare, not because they don't remember, but because self-preservation overrides integrity. It's like living in a house where the walls have been painted over countless times to hide deep cracks. Asking them to apologize is like asking them to scrape away the paint and face the truth beneath. The cracks have always been there, but they would rather keep repainting than risk the collapse of the whole structure. In the real world, you see this in the person who ghosts you after a disagreement, the friend who changes the subject when confronted, or the one who offers the hollow phrase, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," instead of admitting, "I hurt you and I was wrong." True accountability requires the spiritual strength to step outside the ego, to face shame without retreat, and to integrate the lesson into the soul. And that is a strength many never develop. Their silence or deflection is not proof of your unworthiness. It is evidence of their limits. If you allow their refusal to take responsibility to determine your self-worth, you will remain chained to their emotional capacity, and that is a prison you do not deserve. Your healing cannot depend on the words they withhold. Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And for the emotionally immature, avoidance is just that, their unconscious programming running on autopilot. They are not ready to face themselves, but you can face yourself. Instead of waiting for them to offer the apology you've been longing for, speak those words to your own soul. "I deserved better, and I release this." In that moment, you reclaim your power, not because they changed, but because you chose truth over denial, growth over ego, and peace over the false hope of closure. Understand that a real apology is not about the arrangement of words. It is about transformation. And transformation demands courage, humility, and spiritual maturity, qualities they may not yet possess. Your path is not to drag them into the light, but to walk so deeply on your own that their recognition is no longer needed for you to know your worth. That is the kind of inner freedom that no one can take away. And it is the quiet victory that allows your soul to rise, untethered, into the life you were meant to live. If you've made it this far, drop a comment saying, "I'm aware," below. Your voice matters, and it helps us create content that truly resonates with you. 7. Repetition, compulsion, and echo chambers. They are not simply unaware of the pain they cause. They are bound to what Carl Jung described as repetition compulsion, an unconscious drive that compels them to relive the same destructive cycles again and again, like an actor locked into a script that has no ending. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, Jung warned. And for these individuals, their unexamined wounds and buried shadows shape every choice, every reaction, every relationship. The soul, carrying scars they refuse to acknowledge, moves them toward the familiar, even if the familiar is toxic. Instead of seeking spaces or relationships that challenge their illusions, they surround themselves with enablers who echo back their distorted self-image. These people form a protective wall around them, insulating them from the sharp edge of truth, and together they create psychological echo chambers where lies sound like facts and self-deception becomes a way of life. Within this environment, they are always the misunderstood hero or the victim of cruelty, never the one who inflicted harm. Any presence that threatens to crack this illusion is swiftly cut away, which is why they vanish from your life so quickly after betraying you, not because they feel remorse, but because your very existence is proof of their wrongdoing and they cannot bear to face it. Inside these echo chambers, reality becomes elastic. Conversations are rehearsed in their favor, inconvenient facts are erased, and every story is retold in a way that absolves them. It is not that they forget what they did, they remember every detail, but they manipulate those memories until they can live with them. The soul, however, never forgets. The unhealed wound remains, festering beneath the surface, and though they bury it under distractions, noise, and the validation of their chosen circle, it weighs heavier with time. Occasionally, in rare moments of stillness, the truth knocks, sometimes as a quiet pang of conscience, sometimes as a sudden wave of discomfort, but they quickly drown it out. They turn to the familiar patterns that numb the discomfort, blaming others, finding new enablers, repeating the same betrayals. This cycle is like a wheel that never stops turning, crushing genuine connection under the weight of their denial. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." But for them, pain is the enemy, not the teacher. They choose delusion over awakening, comfort over truth, control over growth. And so they live in a prison of their own making, one where every wall is a reflection of their false self, every doorway blocked by the fear of facing the reality of their actions. The tragedy is not only the harm they cause to others, it is the slow erosion of their own soul, the loss of the possibility of true intimacy, integrity, and redemption. In protecting their ego, they sacrifice their humanity, and in silencing their conscience, they silence the very part of themselves that could set them free. And so, the cycle continues, each repetition a deeper engraving on the soul, each echo chamber a little louder, until truth itself becomes a stranger they no longer recognize. 8. Your healing doesn't require their change. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And within this truth lies a lesson that can save years of emotional suffering. Your healing does not depend on someone else changing. Too many people remain trapped in cycles of pain because they are waiting for an apology, a confession, or a sudden awakening from the very person who hurt them. They believe that if they explain their pain enough times, offer enough love, or show enough patience, the other person will finally open their eyes and take responsibility. But Jung's wisdom is clear. You cannot force someone into consciousness. No matter how many conversations you initiate, or how clearly you lay out the truth, if their mind is closed, your words will be like seeds scattered on stone. A close friend of mine once spent years in a relationship where she was constantly disrespected and emotionally neglected. She convinced herself that if she just endured, loved him harder, and proved her loyalty, he would change. But he never did, because his comfort in staying the same outweighed any discomfort her absence might have caused. She eventually realized that his lack of change had nothing to do with her worth and everything to do with his refusal to face himself. That realization set her free. Accepting someone's limitations is not weakness, it is strength. It is clarity that allows you to see them for who they are, without the haze of false hope. It is choosing not to walk in circles, waiting for the impossible, but instead moving forward and building a life that protects your peace. Protecting your peace means refusing to carry the weight of someone else's emotional immaturity on your back. You are not their savior, their therapist, or their emotional caretaker. Every moment you spend trying to drag an unwilling person towards self-awareness is a moment stolen from your own growth. The truth is that healthy relationships, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, require emotional maturity from both people. Without it, you are left managing chaos instead of cultivating connection. Carl Jung's insight invites you to shift your focus from trying to fix others to nurturing your own soul. Emotional freedom is born the moment you stop tying your happiness to someone else's transformation and start investing in your own. It is choosing relationships with people who meet you with respect, empathy, and honesty, rather than those who drain you with denial, defensiveness, and blame. It is honoring your boundaries not as walls that shut people out, but as gates that let the right people in. The more you protect your energy, the more space you create for peace, clarity, and joy to grow. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is this: you don't have to wait for someone to change before you can be free. You can choose freedom now by releasing the need to rewrite their story and taking full authorship of your own, because the only transformation you can control and the only soul you are responsible for is your own. As we explore this truth together, let's reaffirm our commitment to protecting our peace and choosing emotionally mature connections. Your presence here shows your dedication to healing and growth. Comment below: I choose peace over chaos, as a declaration of your journey toward true freedom. And so, the truth is often far more complex than we imagine. The reasons people hurt you and then carry on as if nothing happened may have little to do with forgetfulness and everything to do with their own shadows, defenses, and unacknowledged guilt. By understanding these deeper patterns, as Carl Jung taught, we not only protect our hearts, but also reclaim our power to respond with clarity rather than confusion. If this insight has given you a new perspective, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos filled with more thought-provoking lessons for your journey.